Today we're making a simple crow out of a 1 by 1 inch piece of wood. You're only going to need a knife, and the piece of wood should be about 3 inches long. Now, because a crow is not a very vertically oriented bird, it's more like this, we're not going to make it sit on top of anything. We're just going to use the entire piece of wood for the actual bird itself. The first step of the process is marking the middle point of one of these edges and then drawing a line from that point to the opposite corner down here. Just a straight line, so it should be straight when you're looking at it directly from the direction of this edge. And now we're going to remove all of this wood. You can also use a saw for this step, because this is going to be the bottom of the bird, so it should be pretty flat. But these rough cuts and these push cuts also work pretty well for making this flat. That's good enough for now. Next we're going to remove these 3 edges. We're going to leave this one for now, but these 3 are going to be made round, just a little bit like that. You can basically just draw the biggest possible circle in the middle here and then leave this corner out of it like that. And now these parts are going to be taken off. Something like this is good enough for now. Next we're going to draw a straight line in the middle of these 2 points. So the furthest away point over here on the top of the circular edge, and then this triangular point right in between, just a straight line. And then we're going to remove this bit of wood. So you can draw a straight line down so that this line and this face on the bottom is going to make a 90-degree angle. Next, here on the back, on the longest side, we're going to divide this into thirds, and then the top third is going to connect down here in a straight line, the same on the other side. And now we're going to remove some of this wood from the sides, so we're going to divide this area into 2, then the remaining halves in half, and now these 2 areas are going to be removed. And this can be done with sweeping cuts, so we're not going to make a straight angle here, we're going to make a nice curve that ends about here. Something like that. Next, to make this a little bit easier, we're going to draw a very basic side profile. So the beak is going to be right here, and we can connect the beak to the back of the neck with a very simple curve like this. Something like that. And now we can carve this into this rounder shape. Like that. And now to make this part of the side profile, we first need to make this round. So the same way as on the top, we can just make this part as rounded as it needs to be to create a nice kind of circular, or this is going to be more like an oval shape. So just to connect it to these sides smoothly, something like that. And then we can take this off. Like that. And now we're gonna make kind of like an S shape starting from here on this edge. And then this outside curve is gonna be about here where this curve starts. And then all of this is gonna connect here in the middle. Like that. And now we have this very gentle S shape, like that. And this can be now carved with these sweeping cuts, starting from the edges, because removing these sharp edges is much easier, and then going towards whatever is left. And then a few push cuts over here to remove the rest. Next, over here on the back, about here where we have this line, we're gonna make a V cut. It's gonna be short on this side where the head is gonna be, and then it's gonna be very long all the way down here on the side of the back. Something like that. So we're removing only a few millimeters of wood this way. If it's hard to understand how much wood to remove, I suggest looking at some reference images. Now this is going to be one of the defining features that'll make this figure look like a crow. Because if we just make a V-cut like this and leave this bump over here, it's kind of like a pigeon. But instead, when we make this straight, it's going to be a lot more like a crow. That's good enough for now. Next, we're going to draw another straight line from here to here, and it's going to be parallel to this line. And if you barely have any line left over here, you can just try to make it so that this angle is going to be approximately 90 degrees between the back and the line. And then from here all the way over here, we're going to make this tail part a bit more pointy, like this, while leaving this straight area over here. This should be about 1/3 of the entire thickness of the bird at the moment. And then we're going to remove these extra parts. At this point we have a pretty decent basic shape. It's still very blocky and it has a lot of sharp edges, and that's what we're going to focus on next. So we're going to make this head a bit more pointy, and then we're going to remove all of these sharp edges and make them smooth and round. Here we can keep this straight inside corner that we made with the V-cuts, but we can just extend the V-cut over here to make the head shape rounder and to remove this sharp edge. And then closer to the sides, the V-cuts can transition into sweeping cuts. Now after rounding the edges and making the head more pointy, this is where we're at. And this is a very basic shape. It still doesn't look all that much like a crow. This could be made into various other birds. It could be made into a parakeet. It could be made into a sparrow. But the way we're going to make this look more like a crow is we're going to emphasize this triangular shape of the body by making these sides a little bit flatter. And then we're going to slim down the head from the sides and make it a little bit flatter over here. You can make the back a little less flat. The middle part should be pretty much the highest point. Over here on the top, I can make this part flatter while preserving the length of the beak if I make these very small sweeping cuts. You probably won't even notice it. They just look like push cuts, but there's a little twist like that, which makes it so that I don't accidentally just split off this entire thing. Now that I made this head a lot slimmer, I can see that there's just way too much mass over here. So I'm going to need to take that down a little bit. And I don't want this to be a sharp angle like this. I want the side of the neck to flow kind of smoothly into this thicker part where the wings start. And then that turns into this flatter, more triangular shape over here. So again, I'm making sweeping cuts over here to try to create that smooth curve. And then I'm using these pairing cuts over here to turn that smooth curve into a straight side. That's pretty good. And then the same on the other side. Now over here on the other side, I find it much easier to make push cuts instead of the pairing cuts I made on the other side. And a lot of the times that's how it works. So some angle might be easy to work with on one side, and then the exact same shape on the opposite side might require a different cutting direction. Next we're going to move on to the beak. And the beak of a crow is surprisingly long. It takes almost half of the space this way. So we can draw a line over here, leaving a little bit more room back here. We're going to make a triangular shape like this. And then two curves like this. The beak is slightly more downturned, but it's not a hook shape like the beak of an eagle. But it's still slightly downturned, like that. And then we can draw where the head should start, somewhere about there. So now we're going to start making V-cuts. Just very, very small V-cuts to reveal just a little bit of that beak shape. And since this is one of the most important details, we don't want to take a huge chunk of wood all at once. We want to make small cuts so that then we have room to make iterations. And I suggest using a pencil on both sides to get a symmetrical shape. Another thing that really makes a crow look like a crow are the wings, since they come very close to the tail, just a few millimeters shorter than the tail. Right here we can mark a spot almost up to the tip of the tail, but the wings, unlike the tail, are gonna make a sharper triangular shape, like this. And then we can just remove the line with some V-cuts. And once you've removed the line, you can finish the shape with some cuts that are closer to stop cuts. Don't just carve this pointy shape. Make sure that there's actually a height difference between the wings and the tail. One final detail is something that almost makes the wings look like they end much higher, further away from the tail. So there's another layer of feathers over here, higher on the wing. So we can basically do the same thing that we just did down here, except that we don't continue it all the way over here. We just make a small V shape like this. That's it for the project. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for what kind of videos I should make next.